Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on any of the audio streaming platforms. Today, I have to say, as a bassist, this is a phenomenal episode for me because we have with us today Ken Tizzard. If you remember if you recognize the name, the Watchmen, Thornley, and a number of other projects, Music for Goats. Ken, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. The sun is out for the first time in like 7 days here, so I'm really happy by that.
Sun's out and tune's out, exactly. Yep. Now, you have a new album coming out called All Together Now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All Together Now was a project that started, when the COVID shutdown first happened, I was already a year into an isolated living because my wife had a stem cell bone marrow transplant the year before for her multiple sclerosis. So I was already I'd been living in Ottawa in isolation while she had her transplant done for the better part of the year before. So I was I had adjusted to COVID living, so to speak, even before it hit. And when it hit and it sort of locked everybody down, I had an understanding of how hard it was going to be for people. So that was when I went online with my Whiskey Wednesdays and started just giving people a chance to escape for an hour and forget about things and not talk about COVID and not talk about politics. And there was such a good reaction to that I decided that I would just record an acoustic record of some of my favorite covers. And I let that be known. And some people reached out to see if they could, get involved with it. So I turned it into a kind of an open letter to Facebook and all the social medias, just saying, if anybody wants to get involved with this, I'm going to choose 13 songs and we're going to make a record and nobody will see each other or hear what anybody else is doing. It'll be a great experiment. And I had about 60 or 70 people get involved, of which I think 45 made it past the finish line of getting something that was that we needed. And we have a combination of people that have never played on a record before, never recorded before. Some people have, they've sort of, I don't like to use the word amateur, but I use it as it's not their job. They have a regular job and they play music on the side. And then we have some people that play with local bands and some regular full-time musicians, but, who aren't really names, so to speak, but, they're the wonderful fabric that keeps our musical community together. And on top of that, we have, this amazing wealth of very popular musicians that I know from my career. We've got everything from Daniel Adair from Nickelback, and it goes down. I mean, I got a list here. I always got to look at it because it seems so crazy to me. But like Our Lady Peace, Crash Karma, The Watchmen, Big Wreck, Ron Hines, we got some of his band on it. Nickelback, My Darkest Days, Young Novelist, Headstones, Headley, Matt Mays, Ian Foster, Lowest of the Low. I mean, it just kept growing. And it was this great experience where, there's a drummer who played on a track, he's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just setting up 2 microphones on my drum kit in my garage, and I'm just going to try and record it for you. I'm like, you send it to me, we'll make it work. And sure enough, we did, and Mike Turner from Our Lady Peace, he came in the very beginning of the process too. He reached out to me, he said, Ken, he said, this thing sounds like a massive project. You're going to need help mixing. Can I help you out? And I said, absolutely. And he did the lion's share of the mixing. It was a massive puzzle is what it was, because nobody heard what anybody else was doing either. So we'd have drummers laying down a beat and then the bass player would be playing something and then, got to kind of make it fit. And I would say 85% of the stuff fit as we collected it and just put it into place. Everybody got a reference track from me, which was just vocals and acoustic guitar that was done to a click track. So, this one is 89 beats per minute. So they could just drop that MP3 into their session and then they could play whatever they wanted along with it. That was the thing. You can whistle, you can play a guitar, you can play drums, whatever. And we just started getting all these pieces back. And I'm, where do I put this one? And where do I put this one? And there's a guitar playing there. So I'm going to move this mandolin over here. And suddenly I kind of got it sounding the way that I wanted to. And then I sent it to Mike for the all the fine tuning and polishing. And he did an unbelievable job. But the result is, this isn't the record that I set out to make. It isn't the record that I would have made if I was making it on my own. It doesn't even really sound like a Ken Tizzard record to me, but it sounds like everybody involved playing together. And that's the cool thing about this is, some of the harmonies and some of the guitar lines and stuff, I wouldn't have gone that way. But when I listen back to them, I'm like, it makes total sense, So it really sort of included not just all these musicians as in they have a part, but it included their part in the process of what they created and how it affected the outcome. And it was really fascinating thing to do. I had such a good time.
I was about to say, one of the songs on the album is a cover of Working Class Hero. First of all, it's a haunting version of that song. It is truly haunting. But to have as many different vocalists on there, you know, if you didn't know that, you know, everyone kind of recorded their parts remotely, you know, you'd think that everyone was in the studio doing their parts, listening to each other and the like. So to hear the production work on that album is, you know, kudos to Mike and kudos to yourself for putting this together. How do you sit there and say, okay, well, you're going to do this part and you're going to do this part? Or was it very much just a free for all? Everyone like, okay, we want to do drums on this song.
Yeah, so that was probably the hardest part of the process, and it did start out as a free-for-all. I sent out just the list of the songs and said, if anything here appeals to anybody, and then, you know, somebody would say, you know, I want to play drums on this, and I'd say, okay, and, you know, like, okay, you're now the drummer on this track, and then, you know, somebody'd say, I want to play guitars, and, you know, you can have 3 or 4 different guitar tracks. So there wasn't a hell of a lot of conflict. The main things that I had to throughout the entire record, the main things that I had to assign were bass and drums, because every other instrument can be played on top of the bass and drums, right? So we could only have one drummer and one bass player per song. So that was the only time that we ran into issues with that. But the whole scope of it was just, I lost track of what I'm saying now. Sorry, I got track. The Working Class Hero, for example, that was the only one that's the only one I had hoped to do a duet. Green Mountains and Me and The King Is Gone. I was hoping to have a female duet for each of those. Unfortunately, there are a lot of females on the record, but I didn't find as many as I was hoping to have come up, and I didn't want to pester people. I didn't pester anybody on this album. It was like, if you want to do it, come to me and we will do it. I didn't want to be reaching out and pestering over and over again. So when it came to this song, I wanted to have there's 5 verses and 5 singers. And Dave Gunning was scheduled to do one. He got some guitar and some bass done on another track, and he couldn't get around to doing the vocals. And at the last minute, Danny, who I'd been talking to from the Watchmen, because he didn't have his home studio running, and he had, in 6 months after the album started, I was talking to him and he was saying, oh, I finally got that studio going. I said, I don't think Dave is coming through with this verse. I said, I think he's really busy. And I had there was another verse that was assigned to, I can't remember who it was right now. Anyway, Brian Byrne was singing another verse as well. And he had a hard time getting into a studio in Newfoundland. So I ended up being a verse shy. And when I was talking to Danny, he said, I finally got my studio set up because I got the new CBC gig. I said, if I send you down the track, can you throw a verse on it? And he said, absolutely. So, you know, the combination of Danny and Matt, Chris Broadbeck, Ron Hawkins, and myself is a really interesting thing. Ron's voice really nailed it. I mean, Ron came out, and I mean, when I hear his voice, I'm just like, oh my God, this guy's on top of his game right now. Danny's, of course, sounds beautiful. Chris from C Spot Run, he did an amazing job, and it sounds very much like him. And the Matt Mays stuff was just, you know, it's just Matt. Matt's just a great, relaxed guy. I reached out to him. He's like, yeah, I'll play some guitars, do some vocals. He also contributed guitars on a bunch of the records. But to have a song, such an important song to me, like Working Class Hero, as sharing it with people from across the country and from across my life was a really big thing. And I was really happy with the way that one came out. I wasn't sure, because it was a little bit like, there's a lot of flavors in this soup. Let's see what it's going to be. It turned out to be wonderful. Yeah, I was very happy with it.
You say there's a lot of flavors in the soup, and it is fascinating when you think about the list of songs that are on this album and the wide range of musicians that you have there. And yet somehow it all sounds like, you know, it's one band that has been playing together for a long time, and, you know, again, all working together. How much of that is, you know, attributed to the ability of the musicians, B, the advancement of home recording technology, and C, the post-production work in the organization that went into this?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a very good question, actually. And yes, there was more post on this album than most records. And that has to do with like everything from, you know, like the bass and the drums. I mean, like when you have a band in a studio and you're recording the bed track, which is the bass and the drums, essentially, you know, the rhythm section should already know what they're doing. And the bass player should know every time a kick drum is going to happen and every time a snare is going to happen and every fill throughout the song. And as a bass player, you play the groove and you fit into it. And then, you know, when the kick pattern changes, you change with it. And when the fills happen, you play with them and stuff like that. There was none of that luxury with this. So we were very lucky that people got the gist of what we were doing. And B, the advancement of technology, the technology that me and Mike were using on this project was, it was Pro Tools based project. I mean, you can't beat that software. I mean, you can Logic and Cubase and Window and, the Digital Performer, whatever you want to do. They're all equally good. But the technology has gotten so good nowadays that, I mean, you can take crap and shine it up. The lucky thing for us is we didn't get any crap. we got some stuff that didn't quite sound great, but the performances were good. The intentions were solid. And there was a fair bit of moving around, but in all honesty, I was really shocked at how close to the mark people were when I got things in. I mean, I don't think there was only one, I can't remember what it was. There was one track that I got that I had to send back to somebody and say, I want you to change this because of this reason. It wasn't because it was bad. It was just because it was conflicting with something else or a series of something else's. And rather than change everything, it was easier to change the one. There was a lot of decisions like that in this process. And even, when You're So Bad, the Tom Petty tune, like Neil Pinto, I think was it Neil? Yeah, Neil did the background vocals for that one in Winnipeg. And, he was the first person to respond to me. So I had my acoustic guitar, my vocal, and then I got this tracks from Neil Pinto. I think there was 10 tracks. It was like 3 baritone guitar and 7 or 8 vocals. And I put it all in, I lined it all up and I played it back. And it was he had done all these great low haunting vocals. And like the song sounded presentable just like that. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. And then everything else started coming in. And it was a constant snowball effect of things getting better and better. There didn't hit a point where it's like, how are we going to deal with this or any of that? We didn't come across any of that, which was really surprising because I thought for sure we would.
And in a project like this, of course, part of the, the building block of it, of course, is the song selection. How did you come across or how did you pick the songs that were going to be on this album?
Well, as a musician, since 13 years old, I've been playing original music. I joined a punk band. That was my first band and we wrote songs, and I've been a writer my whole life. That's my life's purpose, I guess. As an entertainer performer, I haven't had much opportunity to play with cover bands, as a lot of artists do. I played with original bands in Newfoundland, moved to Toronto, joined a series of original bands, which led me to the Watchmen. And I've just been creating ever since. So in the last 10 years as a solo artist, I go out with my acoustic guitar and, there's some nights I show up and it's a beautiful theater and people have spent $25 and it's sold out and it's a magical, sort of intimate experience. Other times I show up and it turns out to be some crappy bar and the bar owner says, start at 9 and you're finished at 2. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't do that. But, you bear through it. And along the way, I've picked up a few covers, and these covers were based on my favorites, songs that I wanted to do that in a way that I felt that I understood them. And it covers a lot of the early 80s punk and new wave movement. Like we got Tears for Fears, The Cure, R.E.M., Billy Bragg, the Boomtown Rats, John Lennon and the Clash. That's kind of the punk new wave stuff. And then we've got the which covers a lot of ground, but because I've been playing so much folk and country lately, we've got Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Van Morrison, Slade Cleaves, George Jones, and stuff like that. So it's a wide range of music that has inspired me over my lifetime, and songs that I think people. It's a hard thing to take a radio song in certain genres and turn it into an acoustic song. Mm-hmm. I always think like the key to a good song, like a really world-class song that will last forever, you can play it on piano, you can play it on guitar, you can play it with a full symphony, you can play it with a full band, like however you dress it up, whether it's country, rock, pop, hip hop, however, you can make a good song, you can dress it up even better. And what I found with these choices is these were songs that I found over the years that I could adapt to acoustic guitar and play more my style. And that was why I chose them. And I think it's a good selection of music throughout my life. You know, I mean, the most contemporary thing is Slade Cleaves. And I think even that album, Green Mountains, is on Everything You Love Will Be Taken Away, which has got to be at least 10 or 12 years old now. So, I mean, there's not really much new stuff, but it's a new interpretation of a lot of old stuff.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, you know, the touring and all of that. And as a working musician, you know, that this last year had to have been hard. As you mentioned, you were already kind of self-isolating and whatnot, but how hard has it been to not have those shows, to not have that crowd, to not get that feedback when you're performing?
Well, I mean, the Watchmen do anywhere from 3 to 8 shows a year still. And they're nostalgia shows, they're reunion shows. They are, you know, it's a lot of people getting together, remembering a time in their life and having a great time. And those shows are awesome. I mean, there's always a couple thousand people there, big production. I get to break out my big bass amps and play really loud and stomp around the stage like an idiot. I love those nights. I love doing, you know, 5 to 8 or 12 of them a year. Would I want to go back on the road and do 250 of those in a row like I used to? Probably not. I don't think my body can take it anymore. So I do love that part of my life, you know, and then there's the other 150 solo shows or band shows that I do with my, with Music for Goats. And, I miss those a lot. I miss the Watchmen stuff because it's so much fun and it's just such a great thing. And you know, it's a great chance to see the guys. I mean, me and the 3 guys in the Watchmen have such a history. We're essentially family. And you know, that comes with a lot of good and bad, when you live so closely with each other for so long. But it's always lovely to see them. And I love playing music with them. And I love the Watchmen fans. They've, you know, the Watchmen fans have given me, you know, an entire lifetime of identity and reason, which is an amazing thing to have. So that's incredible. The smaller shows, I miss the intimacy. The Whiskey Wednesday thing, I started doing that a year ago. It happens every Wednesday at 8:00 on my, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all that stuff. I'm actually getting very comfortable with it. I'm getting really comfortable with doing that. I also, when we're not in full lockdown, I have the band here to do that with me. So the full band is broadcasting for those ones. So I'm still feeling musically fulfilled. I mean, I have social anxiety anyway, so I've never been a fan of travel and crowds. They kind of freak me out, but I've learned to do it. So that being gone, I don't know. I'm kind of happy being at home, but I do miss the people, and I miss live music. I miss live music a lot. I miss seeing it. I miss being a consumer of live music. You know, I've got my Roger Waters tickets from This Is Not a Drill, which was canceled, and you know, I miss the Pixies, but I was going to catch them later on in their tour last year. And there's like all these bands that I just can't believe that I'm not going out to see bands like I used to. I love going to see music, so I miss that.
Yeah, I think there was about 4 concerts that I had tickets to when all this went down, and it's just like, oh, I wish I could see some of the, you know, bands that were on my bucket list. It's tough. You know,
it's a really tough one. And I don't like the way the industry is doing these pre-sales on shows now that they know that isn't happening. I find that really frustrating. You know, like my daughter's a huge Harry Styles fan, and they're selling out tours 2 years in advance, even though the tours aren't actually happening. But they just give you this reschedule. You know, they just announced that Genesis is going on sale for November in Toronto at the Air Canada Centre, I think. And people are like, how can they be selling shows for, you know, 6-8 months from now when we really don't know what's happening? And the answer is, well, we'll just move the show. And, you know, I don't like that. I don't like these big companies holding everybody's money. And I just like, I got $700 into Roger Waters that I paid out a year and a half ago, and they won't give me my money back. They're just like, no, when the tour comes back, you can reschedule it then. It's like, well, I don't know when this is happening. So I'm finding that frustrating, but that's my own little piece of industry crap that bothers me.
One of the things you talked about too was your Whiskey Wednesdays live streams, and it has a very cozy atmosphere. You know, you got the live chat going on as well, and you're starting to see a lot of bands that are leaning into this idea of live streaming their shows, whether it be a full on, like, you know, rent out a studio and, you know, get the full light show in their production. There's a company, Veeps, that's working down in the States, that they've actually started to outfit some of the some venues down there with equipment to go live stream. Do you feel that, for venues and for artists as well, the idea of live streaming shows, will provide more access for fans who maybe can't travel to the towns that they want to see their favorite artists? And do you feel that, it adds to or takes away from the live music experience?
That's an interesting question. I've been debating that a lot. In my world, and I have to say this because it is very much a my world thing. I have created an environment that is very much me. There are nights that I sit on the couch, I have my drinks, I smoke my weed and I play guitar, and, it's just a fun time. And I look on the screen and there's people there and we chat and I play tunes. That is what I do. Now, the Whiskey Wednesdays is a show for the people. I don't charge. It is a place to escape for an hour. That's what it's always been. Will it turn into something more, more developed? Yeah, perhaps. As of last week, it is now a podcast as well. So I'm taking the live stream and podcasting it. So that's a nice thing. As for these bands that do, these, $50 or $70 tickets to see them in a bar virtually, I mean, it's a great thing right now for people who really need to see their favorite band. I would rather, we've got Annie Lennox, we've got Robert Fripp, we've got Burton Cummings, we've got Elton John, all playing from their houses. They're in their living rooms on their pianos and standing to their bookcases with their guitars. That's the competition. The competition is we have world-class artists. The beauty of what I'm seeing is they're stripping it down, and I love that. Mm-hmm. I'm finding the more stripped down things are, the more I'm enjoying it. There's been a few of these live streams I've tuned into where people have full stages and light shows and stuff, and it just doesn't look right to me. It doesn't feel intimate. It feels like it's like having sex with too many condoms on. it's like, yeah, I kind of get it, but this isn't really doing it. And I don't know where because what I've been wondering is once things get back and I can go out and tour, do I bring a little 2-camera setup to every show and broadcast that? Maybe. I mean, my show is a different thing too. I do tell stories, and I do, if Music for Goats is playing and it's a festival or something, and we got, the 40 minutes, we play 40 minutes worth of music. If I'm in a place and it's an evening with Ken Tizzard and the band, some nights, those nights go on for 3 hours and, there's no break. It's just me talking and playing. And that's a different thing. Can that be, while I'm playing in an audience for 50 or 70 or 100 people in a little theater, can that then be broadcast to another 1,000 people online? Yes, but I want to be picky and choosy on which ones of those I'm doing. I think that if you start doing it all the time, it's going to lose something. The live experience cannot be replaced. The volume, the heat, sweat, the smell, the entire tactile sensation of a live show, you cannot reproduce that watching it on a computer. However, you can reproduce other things. And that is that sense of intimacy and that sense of connection that, there's been many times I've been in a bar, 200 people in a bar, and I can't really see. It's crowded. The sound is crappy. And, I leave kind of feeling like I hadn't seen anything, so they both have merits. I'm not sure how they're going to integrate going down, into the future. I know that for right now, I'm enjoying the more intimate stuff than the more polished production stuff.
When you're doing the live streams, how much do you let, the viewer interaction guide the show, and how much of it is, this is what we're playing tonight, and, hope, come along for the ride?
Well, I've got, must be over on my other wall. I've got a big sort of 20 by 17 sheet of paper, and it's got maybe 100 song titles on it. Like last week was Dylan Hines. So I had 6 Hines songs and 6 Dylan tunes. I had them in, that was kind of set before. But on an average night, what I do is I will dig through my 200 or so songs that I can tap into. If there's been a special request that week, I'll find those. Anything that is topical, I will sort of grab those. If something's happened that week and I have a song that reflects it, I can do that. My Whiskey Wednesday is basically between 10 and 14 songs. Some nights, if I'm chatty, it's as low as 8. But usually the set list that I have on the floor next to me has 25 songs on it. And I will let I might have 4 or 5 that are guaranteed that I'm going to play. The rest of them will be kind of based on mood. You know, if I see somebody and a story comes up, that type of thing. It's very much guided by the interactivity. I have been having problems, and I see a lot of people are having this problem too, and that is actually finding a proper way to interact with the audience without having my laptop in front of me. The one thing I'm trying to do more and more in my life is not have a screen in front of me. I mean, right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got 5 screens in front of me. It's too much. And at any point in time in the day, I have a television, a computer, and a phone, and then there's, other stuff on top. And the last thing I want to do in my live stream is have my friggin' computer right there. So I try and do the live stream as much as I can without any of the, the lighting from the camera on my face, if nothing else, or from the computers. So, so the reading of the comments becomes a problem. When I've got my cell phone and I kind of take a break, I'm going to check in now, and I look down, but there's always problems with the feed too. It never really seems to load properly, and it's out of sequence. So I haven't figured that out yet. There have been a few nights, like out of the 50 or so nights that I've done, there's been about 3 nights where the feed has worked properly on the phone, and it's been amazing. While I'm playing, I can see the next thing. I can see it happening. I can be in my mind thinking, oh, I got to address that. And it's been great, but it's so hit and miss. I wish somebody'd sort that part of it out for the broadcasters, because it's really frustrating. Yeah, but I do love it when I can be with the audience.
Yeah, live stream latency can be a bit of a hassle when you're on that 30-second delay, from the minute you say something, and then it's like you kind of wait for the response.
Exactly.
One of the beautiful things about some of the music that has come out of this past year has been the idea of, we're just going to do what makes us happy. We're gonna make music with the people that inspire us. We're just going to do music again for the sake of music.
That's right.
Exactly, right. How much do you see that trend following when finally we're starting to get back to maybe not normal, but new normal?
Well, as an artist that, spent a large part of my career playing with the Watchmen in the early days when we were doing 280 shows a year. And, we had gold and platinum records and top 10 singles and all that stuff. From there, I went to Thornley, Big Rec, all of those things. And I walked away from that looking for something authentic. I was no longer feeling the gratefulness and the gratitude that I feel that my musical energy deserves. My musical energy is my entire life. Outside of my wife and kids, and even in the house with the wife and kids, my wife can attest that my brain is it's just always writing, creating, working. Like there's so many elements in being an independent artist. And I'm still 8 hours a day on the computer doing stuff. I think that the spirit of collaboration has always been there, but it's been widened greatly by the COVID thing. Getting shut down like this has created an opportunity. So much of what we have right now wouldn't exist. Outside of the music, a more general answer to the question is, I don't think we're ever going back to normal. I have a lot of friends who keep talking, and I've got to be very careful to talk about this because some people get really upset by this type of talk. But the reality is COVID has made a significant change in our lives. And I don't think that what we knew as normal is ever going to be that way again. It will be something different. And it's not to say that it won't be good. It's just going to be different. And I think that the things that we pick up from this, and like you say, people being happy just playing music, people being happy doing their jobs without having to commute 4 hours a day with traffic. All of these things are gone by the wayside. I've spoken to so many people recently who are like, I am never going back to an office job again. Like, I am not. This will not happen. Lives have changed. Our outlook on everything has changed. And I think that the outlook on music that's changing, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way that people are approaching delivering their music, being live streaming and stuff, is that we're seeing, I could take probably, out of the last 10 bands I've seen, I could probably take 5 of them. And without the lights, smoke show, and all the backing tracks, those bands would not be able to play a live show. And what this has done is it's kind of leveled the playing field in that if you're going to get people to come to a live stream to watch it, it either has to be really expensive and technically just awe-inspiring, and you've seen those too, I'm sure. Or it has to be something very different and very real, because people don't have time for bullshit anymore, I don't think. And I think that's going to create a whole new experience of music, which is going to be more like, the way it used to be, in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. I have a really hard time paying a lot of money these days to go watch a band and see the singer put the microphone up above his head and the vocals are still happening. That drives me fucking crazy. And I've seen it so many times. And when I do see it, I turn to the people around me. I'm going, did you see that? And they go, yeah, it's all recorded. It doesn't matter. I'm like, when did that happen? When did playing to backing tracks, like not just having like, an additional chorus or something or an extra guitar come in, but like people basically playing with an album track through the PA. It's just like, it's really, I can't believe that we've come to that place. And I do see a return to authenticity, for lack of a better word. And I'm excited to see that, because that's where my heart lies for a lot of the music that I like.
We have a lot of listeners for the podcast that are not in Canada. And when you were going through the list of, musicians and the bands that they represent, that are playing on this album, it's not just a who's who, but it's literally a laundry list of some of the best bands that were, that are flying the maple leaf. You mentioned, Nickelback, the Headstones, the Watchmen. I know Creighton Doan's on there, who was doing some work with Harum Scarum, who is a phenomenal band. Like, how much of this album is going to open up to new listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with, the vibrancy of the Canadian rock scene?
Well, Canada has historically, we have a smaller population in the States, so everything is going to be on scale smaller. But I do feel that Canada has represented itself pretty well in the radio rock and even commercial radio stuff. Everything from Justin Bieber to April Wine, there's a lot of stuff. And so many great Canadian bands that have, like, when I look back through my life the last 50 years and think back to, every song that I've kind of heard, there's always been a Canadian in the mix. We're not dominating, but we don't have the population to dominate. We're not, and when I say we don't have the population, that also means that we don't have the record companies. I don't know how many record companies are left in Canada now, but it's like, out of the majors, I think it might be one or two. Whereas it used to be, we used to have tons of them. They're all gone. And with the loss of the record companies and the deconstruction of the industry, the money is gone too. So it's just a weird time. It's just strange all around. But there are, the Canadians are always well represented, especially in Canada with the CanCon and stuff. Do I hope that this open, I don't know if I can turn anybody else on to Nickelback, but at the same time, Sean Panting is one of my favorite songwriters, and he's on the album. He's a friend of mine from Newfoundland. I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, somebody, on one of my posts about Sean during this album, somebody clicks on a link and listens to some of his music and goes, yeah, this is great. That's, like I say, all together now. Let's help each other out. Even the videos that I'm working on, I'm collaborating with visual artists. So the video for Mad World has Marcel Levandier from Newfoundland, who's a street photographer. He's brilliant. I've got Tim Lee doing Don't Think Twice with his art. He's the guy who did the album cover, and I think I've got 60 of his images. Rayanne Hollaboff from Vancouver is doing a painting, and she's time-lapsing it so that the entire creation of the painting is the video. I have a puppeteer as well doing a puppet video, and some other visual artists. So I'm trying to get everybody to work together. And that's, I have a bit of a utopian view and hope for the world that, sometime in the future that musicians and artists will all be able to work together like this. It just gets so competitive sometimes, especially when you do get into the corporate world stuff and start incorporating those sort of art of war type politics and music. It just gets really ugly. So I'm trying to keep things just working one-on-one with people.
When you were picking the songs, you picked songs that, really spoke to you and were formidable as far as your own personal musical education. What is it when you hear a song? It doesn't matter what era, but when you hear a song and it really speaks to you, the hair is up on the arms or on the back of the neck. What is it? Is it the riff? Is it the chord progression? Is it the lyrics? What speaks to you most?
Well, I remember the first time I heard Massive Attack's Teardrop. I was in Europe. I was in a clothing store in Brussels, I think. And I heard that sort of the low thumping of the kick drum. And as soon as she started singing, I stopped what I was doing and I stood there and I listened to the entire song. And I went up to the person after. I said, who is this we're listening to? And they told me it was a band called Massive Attack. Her voice just pulled me in. I still to this day don't know what the words are. And melody and riff, it's really just kind of a haunting thing. So like, I find often it's just the voice itself, the character of the voice. People like Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Nick Drake, Angela McCluskey, people like that. I find that I'm attracted to their voice. And then there's other stuff in the folk world. Like I'm a huge fan of Slade Cleaves because of his lyrics. His lyrics paint such great stories and pictures. In 3 minutes, it's like reading a short story. It's just it's a different type of thing again. And then when it comes to rock and roll, riffs are cool. Riffs are awesome. As a bass player, I love good riffs, everything from, the simplicity of the bass lines in some of the world's greatest songs to, transcribing Rush covers. I love a good riff. So it depends on my mood and it depends what I want to do. It's just sort of it depends. I can't say one thing that grabs me, but I mean, generally it's, the three things, the voice, the sound of the voice, the texture of the voice, the delivery, that's the key element for me. And after that, it would be lyrics and then music, I would imagine.
Do you remember the first time you went to a record store with your own money? Not someone got you a Christmas gift or something like that, but actually going to the record store with your own money and buying an album for the first time. Do you remember which album that was?
I do. For Christmas, I'd gotten my first 3 records, The Police, Ghost in the Machine, Long Distance Voyager by Moody Blues, and Some Girls, I think it was, by the Rolling Stones. And I was a young child. Those were the first 3 albums that I got at Christmas. And I had some Christmas money. So I remember going down to Zeller's, and I didn't have enough to buy a record, but I could buy a 45. And I bought Xanadu by, wasn't Debbie Harry? Blonde hair. I see her face. I can't remember her name. Anyways, it was a 45 for Xanadu. Olivia Newton-John. That's what it was. Olivia Newton-John. And I remember getting home and being really disappointed in it. And it was my first purchase. And I was like, But shortly after that, I went downtown St. John's and discovered a place called Fred's Records. And Fred's Records is my favorite record store in the world. It's huge. The staff know everything. Tony, who was there the first day that I went in when I was 13, is still there. When it comes to Newfoundlandia and content from home, they know everything. And growing up in Newfoundland in the early 80s, when I was into punk rock, you couldn't get that stuff anywhere. And every week, Fred's Records would import in and they'd bring in like a Husker Du or Stiff Little Fingers or some weird Motorhead live album from Germany. And you'd find these gems. And I have such a warm place in my heart for Fred's Records, and I always will. I got turned on to so many artists that impact me still today from Fred's Records back home in Newfoundland.
So that brings us to the pivotal question of the podcast. And we've talked about this a little bit before when we were communicating back and forth. So we've got to this question, Ken. If you were to introduce yourself to an absolute stranger, but instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Ken, I play bass, I'm awesome," you hand them a mixtape. And on that mixtape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape, and why are those songs there? Well,
mixtapes for me, that was a thing when I was growing up. And you made mixtapes for girls you liked. And you made mixtapes for your close friends who shared certain musical interests. So that's how kind of mixtapes work for me. And nowadays it's called playlisting. And I haven't really quite gotten into that yet. I don't know why. I think it's too easy. I think it's too easy to create a playlist and then go get another play. When you made a mixtape, you had to sit down with a double cassette player or, taping off the radio is what I used to do. I used to listen to the top 10 on Friday nights and, record each song and try and get clean versions with the DJ who's not talking. And then you dub copies from there. But the way I decided to approach this question for you is to, I'm also a huge fan of albums. And I think that I wouldn't actually say to somebody, I've made you a mixtape of songs. I would say, I've made you a mixtape of all my favorite albums. And I can specify on that, but I'll just run through them quick. Pink Floyd, The Final Cut, as a record, I think it's just a brilliant top to bottom album.
It is arguably one of the most underrated Pink Floyd albums out there.
I agree. And it is so brilliant. I mean, the guitar solos, which are few and far between, but they tear your flesh off. And the story of that album and the beauty of the music is, I mean, I still listen to that album every week. You know, it's just one of those albums that gets put on at least once a week. I just love it.
May have been one of Roger Waters' best vocal performances when you listen to the song Fletcher Memorial Home. Such a good album.
Yes, and the Fletcher Memorial would be the song that I would recommend from that one if I was to recommend one. Yeah. Then there's another album. Marianne Faithfull put out an album called Broken English, and on that album she does a version of Working Class Hero, and that's actually my favorite version of that song. So I always kind of have to include that. The rest of the album I love, but it's not like a, oh my god, this is the best album in the world. It's just a great record to put on. But that song, I always turn it up. Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks. Pretty much anything from that. Mary Jane and the Jack of Hearts is one of those great long story songs. Shelter from the Storm is also a beautiful song. That album is one that I still listen to every week from front to back. Can't get enough of that. Minor Threat. They have a complete discography album which covers all of their EPs. Otherwise, Out of Step would be the one there. Minor Threat were the great punk band from the early 80s, fronted by Ian MacKaye. And wonderful stuff there. If I had to pick a song, it would be Filler from the Minor Threat. The Smiths, Strange Ways, Here We Come, Queen is Dead, Hateful Hollow. Either of those three records, and probably if I was to choose a song, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. I just think that's the quintessential Morrissey lyric, and it just sort of sums up his bitter attitude to the world. Sugar, Copper Blue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bob Mould and Husker Du. Husker Du were a very huge punk band in the scene back in the 80s, and Bob Mould has gone on to form a bunch of bands. And he put out a record under the band name Sugar, and it's called Copper Blue. And everything on that album from front to back is just brilliant. It's a wall of guitars. It's absolutely lovely. Television, Marquee Moon. I mean, that album, you cannot go wrong with anything on it. Friction is a great track from there. Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend, another one of those records. I mean, yeah, it's pure pop, but it is unbelievable. And having the guitar players from Television playing on that record add a real dirty edge to Matthew's pop sensibilities. And Girlfriend would probably be the choice off that album too. It's just, I love the George Martin quality of the production, and I love the noisy guitars. It's just amazing. Pixies, Doolittle, album that I couldn't get through a week without. I still listen to that one. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the bass tone or what, but I love it. Dead Kennedys, Fresh Fruit for the Rotten Vegetables, classic album. It's a must for me. If I had to pick a song, Holiday in Cambodia, I mean, you could take any of them. They're all great. And, if you're not familiar with the Dead Kennedys, you can pick any song on that record and listen to it. And it's just going to be more of similar, the same. And it is great. The Cure, Standing on a Beach, brilliant early record. It's really hard to find. And I don't even think it's out in digital. It's a weirdly hard to find record. It has strange songs on it, like Killing an Arab, which is a song that I talk about a bit because it's such a strange song to talk about, because I don't know if it's politically correct to have songs like that. But then I listen to the words and I think, yeah, I see what's going on. So it's a weird thing. But The Cure, another big band. And then from a couple of the folky stuff, I have to nod to Slade Cleaves. Slade Cleaves is an Austin singer-songwriter. He has an album called Broke Down. The song Broke Down would be my choice as well. Great story songs, great instrumentation, great arrangements, lovely voice. And to finish it off will be Ron Hines, of course. Anything by Ron. Ron has a small catalog, small-ish, compared to Dylan and people like that. All the records are very different, but they're all brilliant. His songwriting, he captures Newfoundland in a way that nobody else does, and he puts them into the songs. And it might be the Newfoundland, my Newfoundland heritage that makes me love that so much. But I just find that, like a song like My Father's Ghost, which would be my selection from Stealing Genius, that song again just paints such a good story, and it does it in a really, really nice, concise musical way. And I'm a big fan of that type of delivery. So those are sort of the albums that, like I say, it runs a little bit of the gamut. I was going to put Yo-Yo Ma's Cello Suites in there as well, but I thought that might get too confusing. But
nothing wrong there. One of the nice things about this album is that you've been able to kind of make it a family affair with your daughters singing back up on there. How important and enjoyable was that to have the album become not just a personal project but a family project?
Well, years ago when I left Thornley to pursue my career in singer-songwriter folk music, whatever it would be called, most of the people that I knew in the music business, peers and business people alike, a lot of them use the phrase career suicide. I was going from a band that was on tour down in the States, opening up for Nickelback and Three Doors Down and Puddle of Mud and stuff like that, and we were playing for thousands of people a night. And I wasn't happy, and I wanted to play music that felt like it made me happy. And when I really evaluated that, it came back to a semi-folk acoustic type sound. So part of what I was doing, because I was on the road so much, I was missing my kids. I remember being on the road. We were opening up for Breaking Benjamin in Utah, I think it was. And I was outside after our set, and I was having a smoke on the sidewalk, and I was talking to my daughter who was turning 3, and I hadn't seen her in almost a year. And when I got off the phone, I started thinking, what am I doing? Like I'm sitting on a curb in Salt Lake City. I don't really know anybody here. I'm not really having fun. And I just said happy birthday to my 3-year-old daughter that I haven't seen in almost a year. That's a third of her life. And that was when I made the conscious decision to come back home and start to rebuild something. And what we did that following summer was we bought an RV, and I would do my solo tours because my wife was a school teacher. So I'd pick them up the last day of the school, and we'd go across country and down to the States and back up, and I would tour with the family. So at that time, the kids were like 4 and 6. And we just started singing by the campfire, and songs like Sonny's Dream and, I'll Fly Away, some of the old classics. And we just started singing. And slowly over the years, they started joining me on stage for songs. And then we started recording some stuff. And now anytime I'm recording or doing anything, they're always here. I mean, they play on the Whiskey Wednesdays with me regularly. Anytime I'm recording, even if it's an album for somebody else and I need a female vocal, I can just say, hey, Caitlin or Cassidy, can you come in and lay this down? And because they're really good singers, they actually are good singers, and they understand harmonies, and they understand what, breathing and phrasing. I don't know how they learned it. Maybe it was just, something that's ingrained in them. But it was this record, and most of my life is really, I spent a long time, the majority of my early life was spent just focused on music, and I didn't have time for friends, relationships, or families. And I remember when my mother died, she said to me, she said, Ken, I'm really proud of you. I love everything you do. She said, but you do need to find a balance. You can have family in your life as well as music. And I remember thinking about that, and it kind of hit me. And that was when I started to make changes to be more inclusive to the people around me. And I was so focused on music for so long. It was just like, this is it. And anything that got in the way was just cut out of my life. I'm learning to balance that more these days, and having my family involved in things is really important.
For anyone who's going to sit down, put the headphones on and listen to All Together Now all the way through, what sort of takeaway from that experience are you hoping that the listener gets?
Well, I'm hoping that you hear something that's cohesive. And that might just be my own sort of hang up with this record. Like, my wife listened to it first time she listened, she said, oh my God, it sounds great. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, no, it sounds really good. I'm like, what do you mean it sounds good? Like when I listen to it, I'm still so focused on hearing all the bits and who and what and where it came from and how it's working with other things. I'm hoping that when people listen to it, they don't hear that, or they don't look for that. As much as that's part of the story of this album, the first time you sit down with headphones and listen to it, I just want you to think, wow, that's a great collection of songs done really well. And in a lot of cases done differently than you would expect. And I think we achieved that. Now, whether people hear that or not, I'm not sure. But I just want people to have a good time listening to music. And if you do sort of have time to, at all get cerebral about the album, have a look at the people on it and have a look at and start thinking about what went into it, because it's a pretty interesting process.
Well, I can say from experience that it is a phenomenal album. There's a bunch of songs on there that I'm just saying there. It's like, this is amazing. Again, Driver 8, Mad World, Working Class Hero, Green Mountains. They're all really phenomenal, not just good songs, but phenomenal versions of those songs. And you've done an amazing job at assembling everyone and putting together something really special. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time and hopping on the podcast. Where can we find you on social media, and when can we get our hands on a copy of All Together Now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm on social media. There's a website, kentizzard.com. From there, you can, read everything from my blog. We got all the videos there. The Whiskey Wednesday happens there at 8:00 on Wednesdays. I'm pretty active on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I don't really do TikTok. It's not my forte. It's not really my thing. But any of those things, it's either K Tizzard or Ken Tizzard. At any of those, you can find me. Album's out May 18th. Physical orders, like I say, there's a limited number of vinyl, and I think. A lot of them are accounted for already, but there definitely lots left, but they are moving. So it's vinyl on the 18th, digital same time. It's I don't know how people are consuming nowadays. I hope that when it comes out, that enough people hear about it to either download it or order it or whatever, and make it into something that we're all proud of.
Well, however you do listen to your music, listeners, definitely take the time to stop and listen to this album. It's an hour of, it's an hour you will not regret. Ken, thank you so much for hopping on the show. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. If you're listening to us on an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire video on YouTube. But if you're watching this on YouTube already, you can hop on over to Spotify and listen to the entire thing and download it on all of your audio streaming services. Until next time, Ken, thank you so much. This is the Made You a Mixtape podcast. We'll catch you later.